The old house looked exactly like the photos on Airbnb, charming if a bit weathered. My brother Jake and I had just unloaded our bags and were ready to kick back and celebrate his graduation. We were buzzing, but that excitement quickly gave way to an uneasy feeling when I noticed a cold draft emanating from the basement. "Hey, want to check out the basement?" I asked Jake, trying to sound casual despite the shiver that ran down my spine. Jake and his friends were busy setting up the barbecue, so they gave me an indifferent nod. The chill grew more pronounced as I made my way to the basement door. I hesitated before pushing the creaky door open. The stairs were steep and narrow, leading down into almost complete darkness. I flicked on my phone's flashlight and descended cautiously. The basement was dusty, filled with old furniture and forgotten belongings. I was drawn to an ancient, dusty table in a corner. It looked ancient, with intricate carvings on its legs and a surface covered in grime. I brushed off the dust with my hand and studied it more closely. There was something oddly unsettling about the table, like it was a relic from a past that shouldn't be disturbed. I tried to shake off the eerie feeling and turned to leave, but something caught my eye, an old chest tucked behind the table. I wanted to open it, but it was locked. My curiosity was piqued, but I didn't want to spend too much time down there, especially with the strange atmosphere pressing in around me. As I climbed back up the stairs, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder at the basement's darkness, feeling an odd sense of being watched. Shaking off the thought, I rejoined Jake and his friends outside. They were laughing and enjoying themselves, and I tried to blend in, though the unease lingered. As I settled into my room that night, the unease grew stronger. I kept hearing faint clanging noises from the basement, but every time I tried to rationalize it as the house settling or pipes expanding, my anxiety only increased. The sounds continued, and I could feel my heartbeat quickening with every echo. Unable to ignore the noises, I tiptoed to the basement again. The washing machine was running, though it had been off when we arrived. The sound of the drum turning by itself was unnerving. I checked the machine. No water overflow, no apparent signs of malfunction. Everything seemed normal, except for the chilling feeling that something was wrong. My mind raced as I made my way back upstairs. The noises had stopped, but the feeling of being watched persisted, making sleep elusive. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. Yet the memory of that strange table and the eerie atmosphere of the basement haunted my thoughts. I knew I needed to investigate further, but as I lay there, the chill of the basement seemed to seep into my bones, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting in the darkness, just beyond the reach of my flashlight's beam. As soon as we arrived at the old Airbnb, the air felt different. There was a chill, not from the weather, but something inexplicable. My brother Jake and I barely noticed it as we unloaded our bags and set up for his graduation celebration. Our friends Megan and Tyler were already joking around, oblivious to the strange atmosphere in the house. "Hey, I'm going to check out the basement," I said, more out of curiosity than necessity. The house was old, with creaky floors and musty smells, but the basement seemed especially intriguing. I went down the narrow, dimly lit stairs, feeling the temperature drop with each step. At the bottom, I found the basement as expected, bare concrete floors and a few old storage boxes. Then I saw an old, dusty table shoved in a corner. It looked out of place amidst the otherwise space. I approached it, brushing off the thick layer of dust. The table was heavy, made of dark wood with intricate carvings. It had a faded elegance, but something about it felt unsettling. I tugged at the table, trying to move it into the center of the room for a closer inspection. A sudden chill swept through me as I did, and I felt a strange sensation like being watched. I shook off the feeling, trying to rationalize it as nerves. "Megan, Tyler, check this out!" I called up the stairs, but they were too absorbed in their conversation to hear me. I glanced around the basement again, noting how silent and still it was, almost unnaturally. There was no sound from the washing machine in the corner, which was strange because it had been running earlier when I came down. The table's surface was scratched and worn, but I noticed something odd, a small, peculiar box tucked under it. I reached for it, and as soon as my fingers touched the box, a loud clanging noise echoed through the basement. I jumped, nearly dropping the box. I quickly looked around, trying to locate the noise source, but everything appeared as it should, just old and forgotten. Feeling foolish, I decided to investigate further. I opened the box, revealing a collection of old photographs and faded papers. The pictures were of people I didn't recognize, standing in front of the house in various stages of disrepair. Some of the documents were handwritten notes with strange symbols and sketches. I tried to understand everything, but the more I looked, the more uncomfortable I became. The notes described odd occurrences and experiences similar to what we were now experiencing, things like sudden temperature drops and unexplained noises. As I was about to close the box, I heard a noise from upstairs, like something heavy being dragged. I froze, my heart racing. I quickly shut the box and returned upstairs, hoping it was just one of my friends making a racket. But the uneasy feeling lingered. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching and waiting. When I reached the living room, I found Jake, Megan, and Tyler lounging around, unaware of my strange encounter. I tried to play it cool, but the unsettling discovery in the basement had already left a mark. The table and the box were now etched in my mind, a chilling reminder of the strange energy lurking in the old house. "Everything okay?" Jake asked, noticing my distracted expression. "Yeah, just found something weird in the basement," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "Let's just enjoy the evening." But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone in that old house. The night was quiet except for the occasional leaves rustling outside our Airbnb. After the excitement of the day, everyone had finally settled down. I was about to drift off when a loud clanging sound awakened me. I glanced at the clock. It was midnight. I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than the house settling, but the noises persisted. They came from the basement. My heart pounded in my chest as I lay still, straining to identify the source of the disturbance. It sounded like metal banging against metal over and over. Unable to ignore it any longer, I swung my legs off the bed and crept into the hallway. The house was eerily silent except for the clanging, which grew louder with each step I took toward the basement. I tried to gather my courage. After all, it was just a house, right? Still, the strange noises and the chill in the air made my skin crawl. I reached the basement door and hesitated. The old wooden door creaked as I opened it, and I shivered as a cold draft greeted me. I took a deep breath and descended the stairs. The basement was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. The noise source was immediately apparent. The washing machine, which had been perfectly still and silent earlier, rattled away as if someone were using it. I approached the machine cautiously, my footsteps echoing in the basement's cavernous space. I could see the metal drum inside spinning wildly, but the control panel was off. I reached out to stop it, but as soon as I touched the machine, it ceased its clamor. The sudden silence was deafening. I checked the washing machine, ensuring it was plugged in correctly and nothing was jammed inside. Everything seemed normal, too ordinary. I felt a chill run down my spine, realizing that the machine operated independently without any logical explanation. I glanced around the basement, the feeling of being watched growing stronger. My eyes fell on the old table shoved in the corner. It seemed more menacing now, the dust on it almost looking like cobwebs in the flickering light. I could practically sense it hiding something, though I couldn't say what. I hurried back upstairs, my pulse racing. I tried to shake off the dread that had settled over me. I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I lay back in bed, trying to ignore the sounds of the house settling and the distant clanking of the washing machine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The basement, the noises, and the table were a part of something much more significant than just a quirky old house. I was determined to get to the bottom of it, but the sense of foreboding made it clear that this was only the beginning of something much more unsettling. The house was silent as I crept down the stairs to the basement, the muffled sounds of my brother's laughter and clinking glasses from upstairs barely reaching my ears. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me, and the noise from earlier had been too persistent to ignore. My heart pounded as I reached the bottom of the steps, my flashlight casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The basement was cold and damp, and the musty smell of old wood and mildew filled the air. I squinted through the gloom, trying to pinpoint the source of the clattering sound I'd heard. And then I saw the washing machine, its metal drum spinning furiously. I was sure it hadn't been running when we arrived, and nobody had touched it. I approached cautiously, my flashlight flickering in the dim light. The machine continued its relentless cycle, as if mocking me with its eerie, rhythmic noise. I leaned in closer, hoping to find some rational explanation. I opened the lid, and the drum stopped spinning immediately. It was empty, save for a few stray drops of water clinging to the sides. I checked the controls. Everything seemed normal. No buttons were pressed, and the machine was in the off position. I even pulled the plug from the wall to be sure. Still, a nagging chill ran down my spine. As I stood there, trying to convince myself it was nothing more than a malfunction, I felt a cold draft brush against my neck. I spun around, but the basement remained as silent as before. The hairs on my arms stood on end. The sensation of being watched was unmistakable now, like a pair of unseen eyes boring into my back. I glanced at the old table in the corner, its dusty surface catching the weak beam of my flashlight. It looms more extensively in the dim light, casting strange, elongated shadows on the walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that the table had somehow become a focal point for all the unsettling events. I took a deep breath and decided to leave the basement. The washing machine's noise had stopped, but the oppressive atmosphere remained. As I returned upstairs, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. Something about the basement, about the entire house, was not correct. Upstairs, I joined my brother and his friends, trying to act normal despite the unease gnawing at me. I couldn't mention the washing machine or the chilling draft. They were too busy celebrating, and I didn't want to spoil the mood. But as I looked around at their carefree faces, I wondered if they would understand the sense of foreboding that clung to me. I knew I had to figure out what was going on. The house had a secret, and I was determined to uncover it, even if it meant facing whatever lurked in that cold, dark basement. The next day was oppressively hot. We'd been exploring the town and basking in the sunlight, but the house was a furnace. As the afternoon wore on, the heat inside was almost unbearable. I could hear the distant hum of the attic fan, which I'd previously dismissed as an annoying relic of the house's past. But then it stopped abruptly, only to start up again a few moments later. My brother Dave and his friends were lounging in the living room, playing video games and making the best of our stay. I was alone when I first noticed the fan's strange behavior. I glanced at the attic door, its aged wood warped and splintered from years of neglect. It was ajar, which struck me as odd because we had yet to venture there. I investigated, hoping for a sensible explanation for the fan's erratic performance. Climbing the narrow, creaky stairs to the attic, I felt a growing unease. The heat increased with each step, and the fan's noise grew louder, creating an almost rhythmic sound. The door creaked open when I reached the attic, revealing a dimly lit space cluttered with old furniture and dusty boxes. The fan spun at full speed, pushing warm air around the stifling room. I tried to remember if it had been on when we first arrived. I was sure it had been off. I approached the fan, trying to discern if there was a logical reason for its behavior. The fan's pull was strong, but everything seemed normal. No wires were loose, and the motor appeared intact. I turned the fan off and on a few times, but it only sparked and sputtered before starting up again with a jolt. I stood there, feeling a chill despite the heat, my heart pounding. The attic was cluttered with old family relics, but one item caught my eye, a dusty old trunk wedged in the corner. My curiosity piqued, and I moved toward it, brushing off cobwebs. It was locked, but the key wasn't far. A minor rusty key sat on top, almost as if it were waiting for me. I hesitated, but then, driven by fear and fascination, I unlocked the trunk. I found a collection of old photographs, letters, and a leather-bound book inside. The photos were faded, showing people I didn't recognize posing in front of the house. The letters were yellowed with age, and the book, its cover embossed with strange symbols, seemed to pulse with an unspoken energy. I picked up the book, feeling its weight in my hands. The air around me grew colder, and I felt watched. The book's pages were filled with handwritten notes in a shaky script. The symbols matched those I had seen in the journal from the basement. The writing described odd occurrences and unsettling experiences within the house, much like what we had been experiencing. My breath quickened. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The fan continued its erratic dance behind me, and I felt an overwhelming urge to leave the attic. I locked the trunk and left the attic, feeling fear and determination. When I rejoined Dave and his friends downstairs, I tried to act normal, but the dread was palpable. I shared my findings with them, and we agreed to avoid the attic for the rest of our stay. The strange behavior of the fan and the discoveries in the trunk only deepened the house's mystery, leaving us with more questions than answers as we settled into our uneasy peace for the night. By the afternoon, the house felt like it had shifted into another dimension. The dread was palpable, hanging in the air like a thick fog. My brother and his friends were laughing and joking around, oblivious to the dark cloud that had settled over me. Every creak of the old wooden floors and every distant thump made me jump. We had decided to spend the day exploring the nearby town, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, even outside. The sun was high and bright, but the house seemed to cast a shadow that made the light feel colder. The old place was charming in a historic way, but now it felt more like a looming presence. As we returned to the house, the feeling only intensified. I could almost hear the house whispering secrets through the walls. It was a bizarre, unsettling sensation, like invisible eyes tracking my every move. My brother Tom and his friends Max and Jake were chatting away about their plans for the evening, but I felt like a stranger in my skin. We decided to relax in the living room, trying to shake off the strange vibes. I attempted to join the conversations, but my mind drifted back to the basement. It was as if there was an invisible thread pulling me towards it. I couldn't ignore the gnawing curiosity and unease. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I excused myself from the group, saying I needed some fresh air. I returned to the basement door, each step heavier than the last. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, my hand hovering over the door handle. The basement was darker and colder than the rest of the house, and I could feel the temperature drop as I descended. When I stepped onto the basement floor, the air seemed to close around me. I scanned the room, and that same eerie chill from before was more substantial now. The table in the corner looked more menacing, seemingly filling the space with an uncomfortable energy. I walked over to the table, running my hand along its surface. The dust was thick, and my fingers left a clear trail. The table seemed to be waiting, almost expectant. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I had already investigated the washing machine and found nothing unusual, but the house still felt off. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the basement, making me jump. I whirled around, my eyes darting to every shadow. My breath quickened, and the feeling of being watched was more vital than ever. I took a step back, almost stumbling over a loose floorboard. I decided to head back upstairs, but as I turned to leave, I heard a faint whisper, so soft I wasn't sure if I had imagined it. My heart pounded, forcing me to move quickly towards the stairs. The basement door slammed shut behind me with a resonant thud. The house felt almost normal upstairs again, but the oppressive feeling lingered. I joined my brother and his friends, trying to act casual, but I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. The house seemed to breathe with a life of its own, and every creak and whisper in the walls only deepened my unease. Determined to investigate the eerie happenings, I braved the basement again. The unsettling feeling of being watched had only intensified, and I needed to uncover any possible explanation before it drove me crazy. My friends and family were too caught up in the celebration to notice my growing anxiety, so I quietly made my way down the creaky stairs alone. The basement was just as I'd left it, dimly lit by a single overhead bulb, casting long shadows that danced ominously on the walls. The old table in the corner, which had seemed so innocuous at first, now appeared even more sinister. I approached it cautiously, my flashlight beam wavering with each step. I moved around the table, carefully inspecting the area. That's when I spotted something partially hidden behind one of the table's legs, an old leather-bound journal. It looked ancient and out of place among the dust-covered cobwebs and forgotten tools. My heart skipped a beat. Could this be connected to the strange occurrences? With trembling hands, I picked up the journal. The leather was cracked and worn, and the spine creaked loudly as I opened it. The pages inside were yellowed with age, and the writing was scrawled in a hurried, almost frantic script. I flipped through the pages, finding strange sketches and diagrams that made no sense. There were odd symbols I didn't recognize and detailed notes about the house. One entry caught my eye. It read, "The house is alive. The spirits are restless. They communicate through the machines, the washing machine, the fan. They leave messages in the basement, but only those who seek will find them. A chill ran down my spine. The entry described what we had experienced, the noises from the washing machine and the erratic fan. It felt like the journal warned us of something more sinister than mechanical failures. As I continued reading, I found a crudely drawn map of the basement, marked with X's and strange symbols. The map indicated hidden spaces or compartments. My pulse quickened as I realized the symbols matched some of the eerie markings I had noticed around the house. I followed the map's directions and began searching the basement for hidden compartments. After hours of sifting through old boxes and moving dusty furniture, I found a loose brick in the wall, partially covered by the table. My hands were shaking as I pried it loose. Behind it was a small, dark cavity. I reached inside and pulled out an old metal box, tarnished and heavy. I set the box on the table and, with a deep breath, opened it. I found a collection of old photographs and a few more journals, their pages filled with similar cryptic notes and symbols. The pictures depicted the house in various stages of its history, with some showing unsettling images of people who looked out of place or frightened. The journal entries hinted at something darker, a history of supernatural events and unexplained phenomena linked to the house's previous occupants. It seemed the house had a long, troubled past, and it wasn't just the machines or the house settling causing the disturbances. I closed the box and took one last look around the basement. The feeling of being watched was almost unbearable. With the evidence in hand, I knew I had to share my findings with my brother and friends. I hoped that by confronting the mystery together, we could make sense of the inexplicable and perhaps find some peace before our stay ended. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my chest. The basement seemed to grow darker and more oppressive with each passing minute. Determined to get to the bottom of whatever was causing the disturbances, I forced myself to focus on the old table we had found earlier. I moved it away from the corner, dust swirling around me, and noticed a faint glint coming from behind it. I carefully reached the narrow space and pulled out an old leather-bound journal. It was heavy and covered in a thick layer of dust. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, revealing pages yellowed with age and filled with scribbles in faded ink. The writing was messy, almost frantic, but I could make out some words and phrases. Unexplained, watching, shadows. My pulse quickened as I turned the pages. The journal contained sketches of the house's floor plans, including detailed diagrams of the basement. Some of the sketches showed peculiar symbols and notes about strange occurrences. One entry described hearing noises from the walls and feeling a presence in the cellar, precisely like what we had experienced. I felt a cold sweat forming on my forehead as I read through a particularly chilling entry. I've seen them. I know they're here. The shadows move in the dark, and the machines are never silent for long. The entry was dated about 50 years ago, and the author's fear was palpable. I scanned the rest of the pages, hoping for more answers, but the descriptions grew increasingly more varied and disjointed. As I flipped through the final pages, I stumbled upon a small basement map with a marked location. The spot indicated was directly beneath the old table's position. A note next to the map read, "Find the noise source. It knows we're close." My heart raced. Could there be something hidden beneath the basement floor? I was torn between fear and curiosity. The journal confirmed that our experiences weren't just coincidences, but part of a larger, unsettling pattern. I closed the journal and took a deep breath, my mind racing. I knew I had to show this to my brother and the others, but returning to the basement made my stomach churn. I gathered my courage and headed upstairs to find them. I could already hear their laughter and chatter, oblivious to the dark discovery I had just made. My hands shook as I approached them, and I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained what I had found. Their reactions ranged from skepticism to concern, but there was a shared apprehension as I recounted the journal's eerie details. Despite their reservations, we agreed to investigate further. We all descended into the basement once more, each step echoing ominously. The feeling of being watched grew more robust, and the noises intensified. My brother led the way with a flashlight, and I clutched the journal tightly, hoping it would lead us to some resolution. As we reached the marked spot on the map, the air felt colder and the shadows seemed to dance around us. We searched for hidden compartments or clues, but the basement remained frustratingly ordinary. The sounds of clanging and whispering continued, adding to the growing tension. By the night's end, we had found nothing conclusive, but the journal's revelations had left us with a chilling sense of unease. We decided to leave the basement, the mystery of the old house hanging heavily in the air. The day dragged on in a haze of uneasy glances and whispered fears. My brother and his friends were too eager to chalk up the unsettling experiences to overactive imaginations, but I needed to be convinced. The journal I had found in the basement was heavy in my backpack, and its contents gnawed at my thoughts. The cryptic notes and eerie drawings point to something sinister lurking in the shadows of this old house. By late afternoon, the oppressive dread had settled over us like a thick fog. I couldn't ignore it any longer. My brother Alex noticed my agitation and asked, "What's happening? You've been acting weird all day." "I found something," I said, pulling out the journal. "In the basement. You need to see this." He glanced at the journal, then at me, his curiosity piqued. "All right, let's see it." We gathered in the living room with Alex's friends, Emily and Jake, who seemed more interested in the house's history than the journal's cryptic contents. I laid the journal on the coffee table and began to explain. Their faces grew severe as I recounted the strange symbols and disturbing notes. "This is getting creepy," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "But what does it mean?" "The previous owner was obsessed with the supernatural," I explained. "He documented everything he experienced, noises, sightings, and strange occurrences, and the descriptions are eerily similar to what we've been experiencing." Jake shook his head in disbelief. "You think something is going on here?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think we need to recheck the basement. Maybe there's something we missed." Reluctantly, they agreed. We headed downstairs, each step echoing off the concrete walls. The basement, once a place of curiosity, now felt like a dark, oppressive pit. I led the way, the journal clutched tightly in my hand. The air was thick with the smell of must and mildew, and every slight noise seemed amplified. I could feel my heartbeat quickening as we approached the old table. It looked even more ominous now, like it was hiding something out of sight. "Okay, everyone spread out," I instructed. "Look for anything unusual." We began our search, the dim light from our flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. My mind raced with the journal entries, trying to match them with what I saw. I found nothing new in the corners or under the table, but the feeling of being watched was palpable. The air seemed charged, almost vibrating with tension. Suddenly, I heard a loud thud from above. We all froze, our breaths held in unison. It sounded like something or someone was moving around in the attic. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. "Let's check the attic," Alex suggested, though his voice wavered. We made our way up the creaky stairs, the tension building with every step. The attic door was slightly ajar, and the fan was still whirring sporadically, adding to the cacophony of eerie noises. Emily glanced at me, fear in her eyes. "Are you sure we should be doing this?" "No," I said honestly, "but we need to know." We entered the attic, the heat and dust enveloping us. The fan was on full blast, its loud whirring drowning out other sounds. As we searched the attic, I felt a sudden chill, a cold breeze coming from nowhere. The journal's notes flashed through my mind, an old house with a hidden secret, where something restless might be waiting. After what felt like hours of fruitless searching, we regrouped. The attic revealed nothing but dust and forgotten trinkets. Defeated, we made our way back downstairs. As night fell, the house felt oddly quiet. The strange noises had stopped, leaving us with only a lingering sense of unease. We decided to avoid the basement and attic for the rest of our stay. The house seemed to settle into a deceptive calm, but the feeling that something was watching us lingered, a reminder of the secrets that might still lie hidden in the shadows. By evening, we were exhausted and on edge. Once a curious place, the basement had become the epicenter of our fears. I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was lurking just out of sight. The strange noises and the overwhelming sensation of being watched made it impossible to relax. We decided to stay out of the basement for the rest of our trip. The attic, with its randomly turning fan, was another place we avoided. Instead, we spent our time in the living room, where the atmosphere felt more normal. We talked about our day and tried to enjoy ourselves, but the pall of unease hung over us like a thick fog. I couldn't help but glance nervously at the basement door now and then. It was odd how a seemingly innocuous part of the house could take on such a menacing presence. I found myself jumping at every little noise, convinced that the house had a life of its own. After dinner, my brother and his friends gathered around the fireplace. They chatted animatedly about their plans for the next day, trying to push aside the lingering discomfort. I sat apart from them, my mind replaying the eerie discoveries from the basement. The journal's cryptic notes and unsettling drawings had left me with more questions than answers. As night fell, I tried to put on a brave face. We watched a movie together, the flickering light from the screen momentarily distracting us from our unease. Even so, every creak of the house seemed louder, more insistent. It was clear that none of us were entirely at ease. Before heading to bed, I took one last look around the house, trying to reassure myself that everything was as it should be. I passed the basement door again and gave it a wide berth. The old table and the journal were now mere shadows of our ordeal, but the memories they stirred up felt real. The night passed with a fitful sleep. Shadows and whispers plagued my dreams, a constant reminder of the strange occurrences we had experienced. When morning finally arrived, the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the windows. It was as though the previous night's darkness had been banished, at least for now. We packed our things, ready to leave behind the old house and its unsettling atmosphere. The trip was memorable, but not A. We went with for a different way, a mix of relief and lingering unease. The old table in the basement remained an unsettling memory, a reminder of a graduation celebration that took an unexpected turn. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house one last time. It stood silent and imposing, a mystery unsolved. I wasn't sure if I would ever return, but one thing was sure. The house had left its mark on us, and the memories of our stay would linger long after we had gone.